Have you ever heard of the golden stool of the Ashanti Empire? It wasn't just a throne. It was believed to hold the very soul of the Ashanti people. This powerful symbol sits at the heart of a story about empires clashing, a story that would ignite a century of conflict in West Africa. Today, we're diving deep into the First Anglo-Ashanti War, a conflict that began not with a grand declaration, but with a horrifying misunderstanding and a golden head. Welcome back to the channel. If you love stories of forgotten wars and the rise and fall of empires, you're in the right place. Before we get into the thick of it, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss our next historical deep dive. Our story begins in the early 19th century, in what is now modern-day Ghana. The landscape was dominated by the powerful and wealthy Ashanti Empire. Their influence, built on gold and the slave trade, stretched all the way to the coast. But on that coast, another power was growing, the British. They weren't an empire there just yet, but their trading forts dotted the coastline, a string of pearls on the edge of Ashanti territory. The British weren't the only Europeans, of course. The Dutch and the Danes were there too. But the British were becoming the major players. They primarily dealt with the Fante people, coastal tribes who were often rivals of the inland Ashanti. You can already see the problem, right? The British were allies with the enemies of the Ashanti. It was a classic geopolitical powder keg, just waiting for a spark. The Fante often acted as middlemen, controlling the flow of goods and guns from the Europeans to the Ashanti. This didn't sit well with the Ashanti king, the Asanti Bansu. He wanted direct access to the European traders and to cut out the Fante. Tensions simmered for years, with minor skirmishes and diplomatic standoffs. The British, for their part, saw the Ashanti as a formidable but savage kingdom, while the Ashanti viewed the British as just another group of traders they had to manage. The spark finally came in 1823. It wasn't about land or trade routes, not directly anyway. It was about a single man. A British-allied Fante policeman, a sergeant, was accused of insulting the Asanti. In Ashanti culture, an insult to the king was an insult to the entire nation, an offense punishable by death. The Ashanti demanded the man be handed over. The local British governor, Sir Charles McCarthy, refused. Now, McCarthy was a man of his time. He was an experienced colonial administrator, but he severely underestimated the Ashanti. He saw them as a regional nuisance that needed to be taught a lesson. He believed the small, disciplined British force with their superior rifles could easily defeat what he considered a disorganized tribal army. This was a fatal miscalculation. In response to his refusal, the Ashanti army marched south. McCarthy, confident and perhaps a little arrogant, decided to meet them head-on. He gathered a small force of about 500 men, a mix of British regulars from the Royal African Colonial Corps, local militia, and Fante allies. He didn't even wait for his main body of troops to arrive. He was that sure of a swift victory. On January 22, 1824, near the village of Nsamanko, McCarthy's small column stumbled upon an enormous Ashanti army numbering around 10,000 warriors. The odds were staggering. The British were trapped, caught in a dense jungle environment that neutralized many of their advantages. The battle that followed was a complete disaster for the British. They were quickly outflanked and overwhelmed. The Ashanti warriors, fighting on their home turf, used the jungle to their advantage, launching devastating ambushes. The British formations broke, and the fighting descended into a brutal, chaotic melee. One of the most famous and chilling details of the battle is how the British band was ordered to play God Save the King to rally the troops. But their music was drowned out by the war drums and horns of the Ashanti. Sir Charles McCarthy was killed in the fighting. What happened next became a legend of the war's brutality. According to Ashanti tradition, the heads of important enemies were taken as trophies. McCarthy's head was taken back to the Ashanti capital, Kumasi. There, it was said that the flesh was removed, and his skull was rimmed with gold and used as a royal drinking cup by the Asanti. This act, while horrifying to the British, was a powerful statement of Ashanti victory and dominance. It sent shockwaves through the British Empire. The news of the Battle of Nsamanko and the fate of McCarthy was a national humiliation for Britain. The invincible British army had been crushed, and a governor's head was now a trophy. The public back home was outraged. The barbaric Ashanti had to be punished. The war was no longer a regional squabble. It was now a matter of imperial pride. The British response was slow but decisive. They sent more troops, more supplies, and a new commander. The nature of the war changed. It became a grinding campaign of attrition. The British adopted new tactics, forming alliances with other tribes hostile to the Ashanti and using their naval power to blockade the coast, cutting off the Ashanti's supply of firearms. The turning point came 2 years later, in 1826, at the Battle of Dodawa. This time, the British were prepared. They had a much larger and better organized force, including a significant contingent of fante and other allied African warriors who had their own scores to settle with the Ashanti. Crucially, the British also brought Congreve rockets. Imagine being an Ashanti warrior in 1826. You're used to fighting with muskets and blades in the jungle. Suddenly, screeching projectiles fly over your head, trailing smoke and fire, and exploding in your ranks. These early rockets were wildly inaccurate, but psychologically devastating. They terrified the Ashanti army, which had never seen anything like them. The battle raged for an entire day on the plains of Dodawa. Despite the shock of the rockets, the Ashanti fought with incredible bravery. But this time, the combined firepower and numbers of the British-led alliance were too much. The Ashanti army was decisively defeated. They suffered heavy casualties and were forced to retreat. The defeat at Dodawa was a major blow to the Ashanti Empire. In the aftermath, they were forced to sign a treaty in 1831. They had to recognize the independence of the coastal states, renounce their claims over the fante, and lodge a large amount of gold in the British fort at Cape Coast as a guarantee of peace. For a time, it seemed the conflict was over. The British had restored their pride, and the Ashanti had been contained. But the First Anglo-Ashanti War set a dangerous precedent. It was the first chapter in a long and bloody story. The Treaty of 1831 was more of a ceasefire than a lasting peace. The core issues, British expansion, Ashanti sovereignty, and control of trade routes were left unresolved. The Ashanti didn't forget their defeat, and the British didn't forget the humiliation at Nsamanko. The golden stool remained in Kumasi, a symbol of an unbroken spirit. This first war revealed the immense challenge the British faced in West Africa. It wasn't an empty land waiting to be colonized. It was home to sophisticated and powerful states like the Ashanti, who were willing and able to defend their interests fiercely. It forced the British to rethink their entire colonial strategy in the region. The conflict would flare up again and again over the next 75 years, leading to 4 more Anglo-Ashanti wars. Each one was more technologically advanced and destructive than the last, culminating in the famous War of the Golden Stool in 1900, where the British tried to capture the stool itself, misunderstanding its sacred significance. But that's a story for another day. What can we learn from this first clash? It's a powerful reminder that history is often driven by miscalculation and cultural misunderstanding. Governor McCarthy's arrogance and his failure to respect Ashanti power and tradition led directly to his own death and a bloody war. It shows how quickly a minor diplomatic incident can spiral into a full-blown conflict with devastating consequences. The story of the First Anglo-Ashanti War is a crucial piece of the puzzle for understanding the complex history of colonialism in Africa and the enduring legacy of these powerful empires. What do you think was the biggest mistake made in this war? Was it McCarthy's underestimation of his enemy, or was the conflict simply inevitable? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I love reading your perspectives. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into military history, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. Until next time, stay curious.